Hello and welcome to the February 14th edition of Monday Motivation. We're glad you decided to join us this Valentine's Day. Yes, public service announcement here. This is Valentine's Day. So to all you guys that didn't mark it on your calendar, make sure you do something special for that special person in your life. Make sure you show your appreciation in some way this Valentine's Day. After this, I'm actually on my way out to buy flowers for my wife. So I will be taking care of that today. Public service announcement. You can thank me later. But yes, we're glad you're here to join us. And we're going to talk again or devote this edition to Black History Month, Part 2. We talked about it last week. This week, I want to zero in specifically on a speech, I Have a Dream by Martin Luther King Jr. Before we start, if you enjoy these Monday motivation videos, make sure you like the video, share it, subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're on Facebook, like our Facebook page. And if you are getting this, or if you want to get it by email, go to our website. It's right here, monday-motivation.ca. You can subscribe to our mailing list and get it by email. But whatever you do, we hope you enjoy it. We welcome your feedback, either through the comments or through the feedback form at monday-motivation.ca. But yeah, be sure to share the video. But back to our topic again. I Have a Dream by Martin Luther King Jr. Have you ever listened to this speech? I mean the entire speech. I know for myself, I had heard clips of it, but it wasn't until now when I decided, because of Black History Month, maybe just to dig a little bit deeper into the history of what went on in the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s, especially in the United States, but it also impacted us here in Canada. Martin Luther King Jr., he was a great man. He was a preacher. He was a leader in the civil rights movement, and he led a revolution for justice against the oppressed, which at that point in time was very evident. The oppression was against African Americans. They were an important part of U.S. history, but even though they were guaranteed equal rights under the law, under the Constitution, they did not enjoy the rights that were granted to them. They were oppressed. And as with any fight against evil, it came with a cost, a great cost, to many people, especially Martin Luther King Jr. Did you know? Some fun facts here about Martin Luther King Jr. He was born January 15th, 1929. He was jailed 29 times. He ruffled a lot of feathers. People did not want change. The majority at that point in time wanted status quo. They were fine with oppression. But the fight for change comes with a cost. He was jailed 29 times. He escaped his first assassination attempt. The second one was successful, but the first one, he actually escaped from it. He gave over 2,500 speeches in his lifetime. 2,500 speeches. I can imagine. He was one busy guy. He was relentlessly harassed by the FBI. Even the government agencies did not like him, did not like his message. And finally, unfortunately, he was assassinated April 4th, 1968. Hard to believe that this happened in my lifetime. I was a youngster. I didn't know what was going on. But this isn't ancient history. This is in my lifetime. Okay, you know how old I am now, roughly. In his final speech, the night before he was assassinated, he talked about his own death. He said, "I am happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. My eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord." That was some words, a direct quote from his last speech that he gave the night before he was assassinated. Moving on, his speech, "I Have a Dream," was delivered to address the inequality of African Americans, and it has many nuggets of wisdom that are still applicable today. While we've come a long way, there will always be evil in the world. There will always be inequalities. There will always be oppression. and much of what he has to say is still applicable today. So I'd like to take some time. It's 16 minutes long, but let's take time to listen to his speech.
At this time, I have the honor to present to you the moral leader of our nation. I have the pleasure to present to you Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. Five score years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. And so we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. This sweltering summit of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. Those who hope that the Negro needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges. But that is something that I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protests to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. And they have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating for whites only. We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Georgia. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities. Knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you today, my friend, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted. And every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is a faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning, "My country, tears of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. And so let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring, and when this happens, and when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, "Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last."
After listening to that, what are your thoughts? Share in the comments or use our feedback form. All I can say is, wow, what a great speech. What an inspirational speech addressing the issue of the day. Let's take a look at some noteworthy points from that speech. Notice that he starts with historical facts. There was no slander. There was no distortion. There was no trying to get, he wanted to get people motivated, but he was doing it just by stating honest facts, the brutal facts, and they were brutal. He didn't ask for special rights, but only that blacks be given the rights that are already granted to them under the Constitution. They had those rights, but it wasn't being given to them. They wanted what was guaranteed under the Constitution, inequality with everybody else in the United States. Not special rights, but equal rights. He inspired with a message of hope and optimism at what was to come. Moving beyond the tragedy of the past and the injustices of the past, but hope, optimism for what the future holds as a result of this movement. He was opposed to violence. He says, we must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. He was opposed to violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. His message was not black people versus white people. He says, for many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. He wasn't building division, he was building bridges. A true leader builds bridges and reconciliation. He acknowledged that all men are created equal by God. He says, I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Equality, building bridges, not separation and segregation. Although stating the facts around past injustices, and it was brutal, there were many, but there is no mention of retribution. There's only forward looking, for bringing hope for the future. He closes with acknowledging that freedom is for all mankind. He says, and when this happens, and when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men, white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last. Wow. His speech is powerful, it's inspirational, it's still relevant today. Let's take his words to heart. I thought that worth sharing. Thank you for listening to Monday Motivation. Let's take it to heart. What can we learn from that speech? What can be applied to us? What areas can we be doing better? That's something to think about this week. Hope you've enjoyed the broadcast. Have a great week. Make sure you share this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to our mailing list. One other point, my Communicate with Confidence course is running this coming weekend. February 18th to 20th. If you fear speaking in front of people, small groups, large groups, public speaking, if that thought terrifies you, you need to get into this program, Communicate with Confidence. The cost is minimal. If that's a problem, let me know. But check it out. Go to http://communicatewithconfidence.link. Communicatewithconfidence.link has all of the information there. It's a great program. It's built around my journey from a shy, quiet person who was terrified to speak in front of groups to now I'm doing webcasts. I'm a trainer. I moderate sessions. I'm a moderator for online sessions. I help people get online. But the message, the topic in there, the training in there is built around my journey. So check it out, communicatewithconfidence.link. Have a great week as we finish out Black History Month. Think about how this applies to you, and we'll see you next week on Monday Motivation. Have a great week.